All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. Today, we have a very cool guest. We have Phil Mershon, and he has recently written a book called Unforgettable, The Art and Science of Creating Memorable Experiences. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, all related towards events, all related towards trade shows and conferences. Your end users, your clients are looking for intricate, unforgettable, and really good experiences when you get them out of the house. So Phil's here to help us with that today. Phil, welcome to the show, man.
Excited to be with you, man.
Awesome. Let's jump right into it. Tell us who you are. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, some people call me a Swiss Army knife. So that's probably a good way to summarize who I am, because I am an author, I'm a speaker, I'm an event designer, I'm a jazz saxophonist, I'm a pickleball lover, and the list could keep on going. So got lots of different passions and interests, but all of them intersect in this space of creating memorable experiences and moments.
Awesome. How did you get into this world, right? Like the world of creating these memorable experiences, and what started you there? What have you done in there?
I told my sister this weekend, it all started when I was 7. And after church one day, I took my brother, sister, and all the stuffed animals, and we had church, and I was the pastor. But in all seriousness, it started when I worked for Boeing. I was a computer programmer, and they sent me to this training, and we learned total quality management. And in that process, we learned how to brainstorm. And I had never experienced that in my life. And I said, I want to do that when I grow up in my career. I asked the guy leading the class, what do I need to do to become you? And he said, well, become a pastor for 30 years, have a heart attack, and have your doctor tell you you can't be a pastor anymore. That didn't sound like a very good career path to me, but I did start setting out, how do I learn to do this? And a few years later, I began doing that in corporate America, for nonprofits, for churches. And then for the last, 13 years, I've been involved with Social Media Examiner, leading online and then our in-person signature conference, Social Media Marketing World.
It's great. I think really interesting what you just said there, learning how to brainstorm, right? That's an interesting thing. And I think a lot of times when it comes to events, people have to brainstorm ideas, concepts, the experience. They have to build everything out. And one of my theories with events that I've seen over the last decade plus, essentially that a lot of people don't. They go back to the mill. They do the same thing that they did last year. Oh, it worked. Let's go back. Let's do that again. Tell me a little bit about the brainstorming. Tell me a little bit about like learning how to brainstorm and to come up with ideas. Any special sauce that you have or anything that you've learned over the years that you'd like to tell people about?
So I think there's a couple different parts of this. One is you've got people who are naturally idea factories like me. And I think you probably are one, Matt, where it's not hard for us to come up with ideas, but coming up with the right ideas is a more challenging process. And so good ideators need freedom. They need blank space to ideate, but they also need lanes. So you don't want me ideating on just about anything. So you've got to be focused. Like, what's a problem that we're trying to solve? I'll give you a real good example is when we moved from being a single hotel to a citywide conference back in 2016, we started saying, well, what are the biggest problems that we're going to have? What are user problems? And we knew that one of those was people might end up leaving the conference building and never come back. So we started ideating, well, how do we solve that problem? And that's what I would say is start with a problem that you're trying to solve, and then begin brainstorming, how can we solve this in a way that is doable, that is not maybe going to cost a fortune? Because ultimately you want to be solving a problem that your customers are having or that you're having, not just any idea that comes in. So I think creating those lanes, creating the definition. But then there's another concept that I think is important. This is something we're just recently discovering ourselves. One of the co-founders of Pixar wrote a book called Creativity, Inc. And in that book, he talks about how in the early days of Pixar, he was destroying his production team. So, they had the creative team who made these amazing movies, and then there's the production team that makes it happen. And they were destroying that team because they were placing ideas over people. So I think when we're brainstorming, we need to think about what's the consequence of this idea. We may have an incredibly beautiful idea. It might make a great experience, but it's going to be so costly to the staff. Maybe it's not costing dollars and cents, but it's costing time and it's a drain and it's a distraction. So we need to weigh out, like, is this really beneficial and what's the true cost of this idea? And then is it solving the problem we think it's solving?
Yeah, I like what you're saying, because especially relating it to the event world. I mean, budgeting is a huge thing. It's a huge conversation, whether you're in a good economy, bad economy, whatever it may be. And events carry big budgets, big numbers to them. People that are very good at planning events and running them are always worried about their budget, held to a budget, and they're trying to get the most from it. And I agree with you. Like, you don't need to have the big bang, the over the top, stupid, expensive thing to make a statement. You can be creative. And I think it comes down to, like you said, what is the problem you solve? Who is your audience? What do you know about them? It's those details where you can come up with really good ideas that some may cost a little more than others, but you don't always need the over the top, really expensive thing to add into the event to make it good.
I'm going to give you an example of something like that. So there's a conference called Inbound, which probably many of your audience members are familiar with it. It's HubSpot's signature event. And one year, Martha Stewart was one of their keynote speakers. And you know that she's not a cheap ticket item to get her there by herself. I have no idea. I would guess it's a 6-figure fee, but who knows? It doesn't matter. But one of the things she decided that she wanted to do was she wanted to give everybody a taste of this green smoothie drink. I don't know what it was. And she literally had the staff of the convention center hand out little Dixie cup sized drinks to everybody in the audience. I remember that she did that. And you know, as I know, doing that at a convention center, there's a huge price tag, because that's what probably is a $3 to $5 drink at your local smoothie shop is probably a $15 to $20 drink per person when you get all the staff there at a convention center. So I have to ask myself, why did she do it? I actually have no idea. I remember that she did it. So in that sense, it's unforgettable. It's like, well, she went to prison, but that has nothing to do with it. She created an experience, but she created no connection. There's no connection in my brain of why she did it. And so if you're going to spend that kind of effort, make sure there's a reason that's going to stand out in people's minds other than she created a tasty experience, which I'm all about multi-sensory experiences, but there's got to be a reason.
Yeah. I like what you said about using the word connect, right? I have to connect the dots with what you're doing.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about the book, right? I mean, just give us your best sales pitch on the book.
So I do two things in the book. One is I break down what I am going to call the unforgettable formula, which is making events or experiences memorable, meaningful, and momentous. So that's kind of it, the 3 M's of creating something that's unforgettable. But the other thing that I do is I take the metaphor of baking a loaf of bread. And if you think about baking bread, a 12-year-old can bake a loaf of bread. There's really only 4 main ingredients. It's flour, water, salt, and yeast. You mix the right quantities of those together. You let it rise long enough. You put it in the right temperature oven for the right amount of time. You're going to have a loaf of bread that's edible. I mean, it's not incredibly hard to create a great loaf of bread. Now that requires a lot of skill and experience, the right kind of oven, the right ingredients. The same thing is true about events. We have a few basic ingredients at an event, and every event has them in common. But the difference is the quality of those ingredients and the way that you mix them together for the audience that you have. So if you and I, Matt, were creating events, we wouldn't necessarily, even if we had the exact same ingredients, same people speaking, same venue, same title of the conference, they're still going to be different because your team and my team are going to approach things differently, and our audience is going to be different. So they should be different. And so what I walk through is, how do you take each one of those ingredients by themselves and think about making it better and tailoring it for your audience? And then how do you put them together in your own recipe? So ultimately, I'm not giving you a recipe. I'm instead giving you the tools to create your own recipe for making events that are going to be amazing and unforgettable for your audience, for your purpose.
I like that. I mean, that's an interesting way of laying it out, but it is essentially, again, like I said earlier, one of my biggest pet peeves is that people just tend to do the same thing over and over. And a lot of events will feel the same. A lot of trade show booths will feel the same. A lot of activations will feel the same. I mean, the number of people I've spoken to over the last decade that say, oh, we'll just do what we did last year. So I hate that statement. It's killer for me. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Was it that great? Tell me what made it so good. So I love that you're saying, like, hey, there is a foundation Yep. that has to happen every year to order to run the event, right? Like, you need an AV team. Okay, got it. Like that's going to happen. But where are the details? Where are the other areas, like you're saying, to make it memorable, to make it meaningful, to make it momentous, essentially? And I would assume a lot of that has to do with the audience. A lot of that has to do with the problem that they may be looking to solve. I'm sure a lot of it has to do with where they are and why they're there, all those cool things, correct?
Oh, absolutely. You got to start with your audience. Why are they coming? How are they arriving at the event? What kinds of experiences will make this memorable for them? You said this early in the interview. We're all trying to create experiences for people they can't do at home. So that's one of the reasons you're willing to get on a plane or in a car or on a train and go somewhere, is you want to do something that you've not done before, or you've not done it in this kind of way. So if my audience tends to be more women, so if I did something that's more of a typically male kind of activity, they might not find that nearly as meaningful, or if I pick the wrong kind of music. So I want to create experiences that are for the audience that I know is walking in the door, that's going to help them make this something that is very memorable for them.
I always use the term tone deaf. So many people, if you don't know the audience, you can do stuff that you think is cool, or that you think is, they're going to be like, oh, wow, but they're not at all, right? It's tone deaf. Again, it goes back to the audience. Why are they there? This event's not about you. The event is essentially about them, right? So that's, all right, let's dive a little more in here. Let's go to, tell me why it's important, right, to make an event memorable. That's the first M in your book, right? Why is it important to make the attendee remember it? I think the obvious is that you remember great experiences, right? Like anytime you have a great experience at a restaurant or hotel or different thing, you remember it, you tell people, but what's in the meat of all that? Why is it so important to make your events memorable?
It comes back to ROI, but let me go back to a 19th century psychologist named Ebbinghaus. And you maybe haven't heard of him, but you've heard of this. He studied retention. And what he learned is that people forget what they've learned forget 50% of what they've learned within an hour, and they forget up to 90% within the first 30 days of learning it, without intentional methods of helping people remember. So think about that. You're putting millions of dollars, you and your customers are putting millions of dollars into the events you're creating. And if people are forgetting 90% of it, then that's a lot of effort for not very good return. So if we can do things to cause it to become more memorable, then we are increasing the chance that it's going to be more transformational in whatever sense we mean by transformation. So that's part of why it's got to be memorable, is like, we want this to stick with people. We want it to make a difference. If you're in event marketing, you want them to remember that event that you had. And through that process, remember that it was your company that put it on, right? And remember that you were part of that. And they remember the conversations they had. And all of a sudden now it's become a bigger part of their life. And of course, they're going to go to you when they have a problem in the future, as opposed to not remembering and starting all over from scratch.
What are some key characteristics of sort of differentiating your event, right? Like, I think that's part of being memorable, right? Because if you go to the same event over and over, it's not really memorable. And that's probably, not that I don't like meaningful and momentous, the pieces, but memorable to me is a huge one. And I think it goes back to what you said about ROI, about you're spending all this time, all this money, all this energy, effort to put on this event for key customers, prospects, partners, suppliers, whoever it is. And it's like, why not make it stick, right? Why not make it be different, unique, have them leave and then think, and because I think it makes you think and view a company or somebody based on experience differently. You view them a certain way after. So what are some key characteristics for differentiation?
Well, let me define those two words, meaningful and momentous, because I think unforgettable and memorable you could say those are synonymous. When I say meaningful, I mean, you're making it personally significant. So you're understanding the customer journey of the person that's coming in, and you're trying to make it as meaningful for that person as you can. So it's back to that idea of, you got to know your audience. And when I say momentous, it's in the sense of that. I don't know if you know the book, The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. They're Stanford professors. It's a book you should get. They've answered the question, why do some moments stand out and others don't? That's kind of their core question they were asking. And they were talking about it in a broad sense, not just within an event sense. But the power of stacking moments is something that makes something memorable. So if you have a lot of really good experiences, they're going to add up to a positive memory. But if you have a lot of really bad experiences, then it's going to add up to being something that's a negative memory. So I think that's why those two terms matter. But in addition to those two ideas, why it matters or how do you make something memorable is there's a couple ideas that I talk about. One is you're doing things that are unexpected. So, Pete Vargas, I don't know if you know Pete, he runs a company called Advance Your Reach. And he starts his conferences by doing something that is completely unexpected. He starts it by saying, hey, I want you to grab your phone and I'm going to ask you to do something that you probably won't do again. And I don't want you to do again, but I want you to take it. And I want you to send a message to somebody who made it possible for you to be here. Write them a text, send them an email. And I want you to send them a message thanking them for taking care of the kids or taking care of your work or whatever it happens to be so that you can be here, and tell them that you're going to take that responsibility seriously and you're going to lean into this experience. And he did two things there. One is you show appreciation, but secondly, you've set an intent that, oh, I'm here to learn. I'm not just here to multitask. And then he caught me off guard. He did something else unexpected because I'd been to this conference before and I kind of was planning on multitasking in the back. I was going to get some work done. I was going to do my session. But he said, and if you're sitting here and you're thinking about multitasking while you're at this conference, he literally said the words that were in my brain. I want to challenge you to put yourself into this event. You traveled here, you spent the time and the money. Engage yourself and get the most out of it. So it was a personal invitation. It wasn't specifically to me, but it was for me. So he did two things that are unexpected and don't cost you anything. Like it just cost the 2 minutes that he spent on stage to say those two statements that allowed people to say, you know what, you're right. I am here. I want to see what's going to happen. And here's what's cool, Matt, is within the next 3 hours, I had two different conversations that completely changed the rest of that event. And one of them changed my life because it made me realize that I have a book in me that I need to write and I need to start getting serious about it. That was back in 2017. And so that's the kind of stuff that can be memorable, is when you do something that's unexpected, you catch people off guard. It could be way more fun than that. Our MC dressed up as Neo from the Matrix to introduce our CEO for his keynote that was going to have a Matrix theme. That's not something that you were expecting when you walked into the room, but it set a tone of, oh, something's getting ready to happen here that's not what I was expecting to take place. The other thing I like to talk about, I learned from Jesse Cole with the Savannah Bananas, the baseball team, is do something. You combine things that people know in their ordinary life, but doing it in a new context makes it new and memorable. And you're familiar with all the TikTok videos of the things that they do, like the batter who's on stilts or the rodeo cowboy who's a pitcher who's lassoing base runners as they're going from first to second base. Well, if we do things at our conferences that are, again, combining things that we know in real life, but doing it in an event where people aren't expecting it, then all of a sudden that becomes unforgettable. And one thing we've done, and I'll let you interrupt me, is we've done musicals 5 times where we took a musical from Broadway, we wrote a parody based on that musical, and we performed it. And the first time we did it was probably the most memorable because no one was expecting it. After that, it started to become expected, and they're wondering, what are you going to do this year? And we finally reached a place of we can't top it. So let's go a different direction and not do that again. So I'll give you a chance to respond to any of those things that I just said.
Man, I think a lot of those things are really in line with a lot of what event marketers and people in events are dealing with. You do have to stand out. You do have to be different. You have to make it memorable. I mean, let's use a trade show as an example. You're in a sea of exhibitors.
Yep.
How at the end of the day, look, I'm all for the fact of understanding that you have to have a meaningful connection with your customer. You have to know the problem you solve, all that. I mean, I 100% agree. That's a strategy that you have to show up with, but you also have to stand out. You have to fight to stand out and differentiate. So I think all those things you're talking about, all those thought processes are all great for people in events. You have attended a lot of events. What are some mistakes maybe you think you see with events? What are things that you're like, not again? Or is there any sort of guidance that you might have for someone that is tasked with putting on their company's national sales conference, their company's internal event where they invite stakeholders, their company's event where they bring in audiences that are their clients? What's some kind of advice you'd have for them?
Well, we've hinted at this already, but we as the organizers have to get out of our own way. So I'll give you an example. I'm a jazz saxophonist. I love playing jazz. I made the assumption in the early years of our conference that jazz is good background music. That was the assumption that I made, whether explicitly or implicitly, that was the assumption that I made. And so for several years, we had a live band, and we played jazz as people walked in to our sessions. And I'd see the people that loved it. I'd see them commenting. I'd see them taking pictures. After a while, people began putting comments in the surveys, and our staff started speaking up and saying, that's not the most energetic. And I had my arguments. Oh, but we don't want people listening to the music as much as we do want them talking. Well, after 5 or 6 years, I realized, what? Who's the audience that's coming? We finally had enough data to know who was coming and realized the target audience probably never listens to jazz, except maybe on a romantic date night. That's not the association we were trying to make. So I allowed my own presupposition, my own preferences to get in the way of audiences. And I see events doing this all the time. I've seen events that are doing game shows during a break, during lunch, when people naturally want to have networking conversations. They're doing something that makes it impossible. I've seen events where they have a goal. They need people to clear a room so that they can make space for whatever's coming next. But they do it in such a way that people end up feeling less than human, feeling like cows. So one example is I was at a conference where a great keynote had just taken place, and it was very conversation starting, if you know what I mean. It was a good catalyst. I couldn't wait to talk about it. Well, they needed to get us out of that room. So the AV team cranked up the music and drove us out of the room like we were cows, like we could not talk. Yeah. And so we had to clear the room. And by the time we were out of the room, I'd forgotten what that keynote was about. And I was like, okay, well, now it's time for what's next. You felt less than human. So I think those two ideas is make sure you get your preferences on the table and out of the way so that you can look at what's going to be best for this audience, and then treat your audience like people. Like, how do they want to be treated? Most of the mistakes I find that make things boring is because we haven't put ourselves in the shoes of that other person and wondered, how are they going to receive this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've attended events, it hits with what you're saying, where I'm like, man, did they think this through from an attendee perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how is this? I'm confused about where to go. I shouldn't be confused, right? Or I'm in one where there's like 4 speakers in a row for 5 hours, and you're like, this is terrible. I'm not, I need a break. I need 10 minutes to clear my head or something. Like, there's different little things like that. And I think honestly, like I've beaten this drum so hard for events and trade shows, and just everything you're saying really just wants me to make me say it more. It's about the audience. If you are not talking, like, whether you're doing a trade show booth, run an event, what does that audience want? Why are they there? Who are they? And everything should be catered to making their life easy, simple, fun, elements of surprise, convenience, luxury, if that's what they want. But what do these people want? And then building everything around kind of some form of premise on who those people are. Because ultimately, like I said as well, pre-COVID, people would just go places to go. They'd go to a million events. Now people are like, well, I can sit on a virtual lecture, a virtual event for 2-3 hours from my house. So if you're going to get me out of my house for 3 days and fly me to Milwaukee or California or wherever I'm going, make it worth my while. Make the experience mean something to me. And I think that's what I'm hearing a lot from you is carving out a way to do that for your audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to do that. People are paying for experiences when they travel, and they want you to do something that is unexpected, different, or that's meaningful. So if a meaningful conversation is going to end up defining the experience, then create the space where those are likely to happen. It may not need to be this super cool VR experience that they can't do at home, and it's a cutting edge technology. That might be true for some audiences. They want to experience those things that they just can't do at home because they can't afford that Apple headset or whatever it might be. But in most cases, if you've created the space where they can have a profound conversation with someone that they either know well and want to go deeper, or someone they've never met, that's something that people will remember and talk about. It may be that hearing Serena Williams speak at a keynote was cool, but I don't remember a thing she said. But because she did that, I end up meeting someone there who's also a tennis lover, and we end up having a great conversation. Well, that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't gone to the event because Serena was there. So that's just an example.
How do you, in the past, when you're looking and dissecting an audience to create an experience, how do you break that down? How do you whiteboard the audience? Where do you start? Where do you finish? Give us a little bit of an idea. I know we talk about brainstorming, but what does the brainstorming for the audience look like to really dive into who they are, what they want, so you can hit that nail?
So obviously data has to be part of that conversation. What data do we have about who these people are? What have they told us? And in the early days, we didn't have much. So I literally set one of my team members in stealth mode on LinkedIn and just found out who are these people, and let's get as much demographic information about them as we possibly can, so we can paint a picture, which helped our sponsors for the trade show. But it also helped us to understand, well, what kind of experiences would be meaningful to this audience. So right now I get our marketing team involved because we've got lots of different sources of data, surveys. We can glean things from what people read and watch on our website. So I'll start with as much information as we have, and then we'll storyboard who is this person. And we'll try to come up with a story to flesh out. I know it's a woman who's in her 30s or 40s, who's a marketer working for somebody else's business. She's from North America, and she's been doing social media marketing for at least 5 years. I know things like that. Yeah. But what I don't know is, well, what's her life like? So this is where we fantasize a little bit, but you can presume if someone's around 40 that they probably are married and they probably have kids that they've left behind with somebody. And so you start to get a picture of, well, what kind of music does she listen to? If that's her generation, what did she listen to when she thought she could change the world? So it ends up helping us define what our film score is of the event. Is I want music that's going to tap into those memories that she had of, oh, I can go change the world. I can do anything. Those moments when she was super happy. What are the things that have shaped her life? What are the movies? What are the books? So I can lean into some of those things as I'm creating experiences. And then I'm thinking about, okay, if she's a mom and she's got kids, she's probably traveled a few hours to get here. I know when she's showing up to the event that she's still concerned about the kids, and she's probably worn out from traveling because she had to stay up really late, making sure that her husband or her parents or in-laws are set up to take care of the kids. She had to hand off all of her work to somebody else so that she could leave that alone. So I know she's worn out. So I want to do something when she arrives that helps her to feel refreshed and energized and excited. So that thing that I said Pete Vargas does is a great example of, okay, thank that person because it's time now to shift your energy. But I'll also have aromas of tropical scents when she arrives, because I know those are refreshing. And if I have some fruit flavored water, that can also be refreshing when she arrives. It's just small little things that make her seem felt and realized. And then those stories can help me decide, okay, what music do I play as people are arriving and throughout the event? What movies might we reference? What other experiences might we create that would be meaningful? If it's a 40-year-old woman, anime might not be the right place to go, but picking the right movies could be very much the right place to go.
I like that a lot. I think what I hear from that is okay, the first level is this standard buyer persona that most people have. They get the
Right.
demographics, right? And a lot of times when we talk to our customers and we ask this question, who is your audience? Who's the customer? Tell us about them. They go to a buyer persona and we're like, okay, that's great. Love that you have that. Now let's go to the second floor, right? And that's
Yep.
what you're saying next is just get that data, get the personas, but then you could take some stabs and take some guesses and not everybody's the same.
Sure.
But what you're getting at here is that next level is the detail where someone says they appreciate, they get me, they see me, that's where you get that level of comfortability where someone's like, oh God, I love this event, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'll give you a perfect example. My industry has a small niche event, right? And it's a lot of event marketing, exhibit house type companies, and a lot of our suppliers and partners and people, we all go. They always have this event. It is for the executives and the owners and leadership teams of these companies that go. And I've gone every year since 2013. It is always at a like 4 or 5 star resort in a beautiful place. And they do it up because they know it's not just us going to an event to get educated and see each other and network. It's a little bit of a getaway. It's a little bit of time away from things, right? Like I've always appreciated that, me personally, because it is a getaway time for me. So it's like that next level of things I think is huge. And I think I love that advice to people. It's really good.
Another thing that I would recommend at that second or third level is get on the phone with some of these people.
Yeah.
So don't just look at the data, but actually test your avatar out by getting on the conversation and flesh it out by hearing from some of these people, the valued customers that you have. It's one, it's good just to build a deeper relationship with them, but two, it's going to help you have some real people in mind. So when you think your buyer, you can actually say, hey, it's Wendy. This is Wendy. Let me tell you her story. And Wendy's a lot like our average customer. Not average is probably a bad word to use, but our typical customer. And we want to create an amazing experience for Wendy this year. And so now it's said, and it's not just a made up name. It's a real person. You know, she's representative. She's not, you know, a facsimile of everybody, but there's a lot of things about Wendy that help you.
Just thinking about that, I feel like all the post-event surveys I've taken, they're great and you get lump sums of data. But to your point, picking up the phone, either year round, whenever you'd like, or at the event, if it's your event, just walk over to someone, say, hey, how's this going? Right? Because to me, I want to pull on that thread. I don't want you to just select A, B, C, or D in a post-show survey. I want to catch you in the moment. And I want to say, hey, how's the event been? And whether it's good or negative, I want to push into that and say, well, why'd you say that? What makes you think that? Why would that be bad? I want to ask, I can pull and be, oh, wow, that's what they're thinking. Oh, wow, we're really missing the mark. Or maybe, man, we need to double, triple down in this direction, because that's how events become just excellent, where like the demand goes through the roof because you're nailing the little details.
It's interesting. Our CEO has one job at the event, and that's to give the opening keynote. And that after that, his other job is to connect with the audience. And so he has hundreds of conversations. And this year, he was hearing a repeated theme from a subset of our audience who were saying, hey, we aren't seeing any content for us. And so after the event, within a few days, he wrote a very long post saying, hey, we heard you. We realized we missed something, and we have a solution coming soon. And we launched a podcast just to serve that need, because we heard that theme come out of the event. And I think someone on your team needs to have that as their primary mission, just listening. You may not be able to be the person because you've got so many things going on producing an event, but someone has the time and the capacity and the giftedness. Like some people would get worn out having 200 conversations, but other people are even more energized after the 200th conversation. And so find that person. It doesn't have to be your CEO. It helps if it's your CEO.
It could be anybody.
It could be, anyone for sure.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I think we beat on the audience enough. I think honestly, I think it's so important, but I think we've gotten the point across on it. It's pivotal. Let's talk a little bit about like technology, social media aspects of events obviously become huge, right? Everything from influencers to impressions to the shareability is incredible, right? With what you're capable of. You have 5,000 people at an event. I don't even know what the number of the shareability and impressions could be, but it's large. And there may be some people that don't like that stuff or think it's, blah, 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 but it's a undeniable place where we are in society. And I think if you're not trying to leverage it authentically, you're making a mistake. That's just my opinion. I think you need to be trying to leverage it authentically. What are some of your thoughts or advice for these event people as they're going to trade shows or putting on their own events in that space?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple thoughts. One is going to be counterintuitive. Your first responsibility is to create memorable experiences for the people in the room so that they want to come back. That is job one. So that's why you're creating memorable experiences. You want them to come back because that's your cheapest marketing. But job two is those memorable experiences need to be share worthy. So not all of them need to be share worthy, but some of them need to be share worthy. So you're creating experiences that are unique. You're creating backdrops that they want to grab their phone and take selfies. And it could be because you picked a beautiful 5-star hotel resort and not everybody gets to go to those. And you're like really excited by what you got to do there. So that you may not have to spend extra money because you already spent a lot of money being in this 5-star resort, right? But you need to make it easy for them to say, oh yeah. Like one year we had our customers, actually we did this 2 different times. They built a flower wall. So everybody contributed their individual feathers or whatever they were that was building it. And by the end of the conference, you had this incredible, beautiful flower wall that everyone wants to grab their phone and take a picture. So it had a couple things going on. One is it was an activation, got people talking to each other as they contributed to this piece of art. So there's that. And then secondly, they wanted to take a picture. Another time we had a TikTok artist who came and he's a duct tape artist. So he was creating this piece of art throughout the conference and he was taking shots of it as well as a continuous video so that he could do a time lapse after the conference was over. Well, people were watching and wondering, what's this going to become? By the third day, you saw what it was and someone got the chance to buy the piece of art, but everyone's stopping and saying, oh, this guy's got millions of followers on TikTok, but look what he created. He created a piece of art that's just for our event. So like you've got all these meta themes going on that are for the people in the room, but are also cool for people. FOMO, it's something to tap into. It's not something that I would overly tap into. You want people to think, I wish that I had come if they're the right person, but you can't play on that emotion too much. But I do think social media gives you a chance to be relevant to people everywhere. And I think the things that they'll miss out on are those experiences that you can only do when there. If the only thing people are doing is sharing pictures of slides from presentations, well, they could have watched that on, right? Yeah. So what's different about it? Now all of a sudden, maybe that instructor taught you to do something in person that there's no way they could have done online. That's worth sharing and people are going to talk about it. So to your point, it's a lot of it's obvious stuff, having hashtags, making it easy to know, having social media feeds where people get to see pictures of themselves because it creates this reinforcing engine where if you see yourself on a screen, you want to take more pictures. So you'll see yourself again and others will do it. All those things have been done for years. And I think you got to do those things. But the next level stuff is being intentional about the design of where people go. Doing gamification with scavenger hunt type stuff can be really fun. Just again, start with your audience. What's that experience? What's going to make sense to them?
I've always spoke about extending the life of the event, that idea, like extending the event, right? An event could be 3-4 days, but how do you, as a brand, extend what your initiatives or what the memories you're trying to have there? How do you extend it either direction, before or after, really? And how long can it last? And I think that's some of what that can do is, FOMO, it can create a little bit of that, but it's almost looking at the event being like, man, that looked like an incredible event. Because if it's great, people are going to share it. And what are they sharing? How much planning can go into what gets shared? Like most things with events, I think it's beginning with the end in mind. It's kind of reverse engineering things and understanding what does those shares look like? What are people talking about?
Yeah. Well, I'm forgetting her name right now. She did the Oscars social media for several years, and she discovered there's like this 90-day window where social media is really powerful, 60 days prior and 30 days post, and having kind of an intentional plan week by week during those 90 days can be really smart, and staffing it with that in mind, like having the right people on your team, staffing the pre-event, the during the event, and the post-event, and not letting those teams be the same, because you're worn out at the end of an event. So you don't want to be part of this post-event team.
Exhausted.
Otherwise it's going to die. The natural life cycle of an event, social media, is the 30 days after. It's going to mostly fizzle after about 7 days. And we've seen this year after year, and it's a hard entropy to overcome, if we're honest. You can share stuff after the event, but people for the most part have moved on. So it's back to that retention cycle that we talked about earlier. Like what impressions are going to stick with people, and how do we keep that alive? And it starts to become more personal. What are people actually doing with it, with what you learned about at the event? What memories are valid? I think a year-long plan is where we're trying to go, is how do we keep this community activated throughout the year, and not just during that 90-day cycle? But first goal is, can we get 7 days up to 30 days post-event, where they're continually thinking back on it and taking action on things that they said they're going to take action on? Like, to me, that's one of the most important things, is if you can give people that post-event intent of, okay, I'm going to do these 3 things post-event. That's all. Success for me is if I do these 3 things post-event. More than that's awesome, but these 3, when am I going to do it? Who's going to check in with me to make sure I did it? And helping people get to that point, I think, can be powerful.
One of my favorite things to talk about in events is what I would consider to be like initiatives and ROI, right? Because I think for the most part, most companies are operating hopefully from an event marketing strategy. And that strategy has initiatives. Those initiatives are typically tied to company initiatives, right? Because everything's trying to feed the initiatives of the company. And then this idea of ROI, because events are big spends. Give me your take. Let's have a little bit of a discussion about initiatives and ROI for events, what you've seen, and how people can essentially ensure that they are, pushing the proper initiatives, fueling the business the right way, and creating return on investment.
I'm going to speak to it more from a speaker's perspective than an exhibitor, just because I have more experience with them. But I might be able to move into exhibitors as well, because I've actually seen some mistakes and some successes on this front. I think the speaker who comes in dialed in with what they know is a good follow-up to what they've talked about, and they have some kind of free offer that gets people into their funnel, are the ones that can take even a free speaking event and turn it into 5 and 6 figures of income. It's because they've got an intention and they're there to serve. Like, there's one person I'll go ahead and name, like Brooke Sellis has an agency, and I've seen her do this multiple times over. She's taken advantage of being on just a panel, right? Just a panel, but she's been able to turn that into 5 figures of income because she shows up, she delivers value, and she knows how to get people into her funnel. And then when she's at an event, she just serves and serves and serves and says, how can I help? Who can I help? So if you go in with that mentality and you've got an easy way for people to follow up, then you're great. Now, a vendor that I saw that didn't get this right came in thinking that they were going to get thousands of people to show up into their experience that they created, and that people were going to would want to get a free gift and sit through a session and be ready to spend 4 or 5 figures with them on the spot. They didn't get the ROI, and they were mad at us because we didn't help them, but they hadn't really thought through who the audience was. It wasn't even the right fit. So I think that's talk about initiatives. You've got to understand who is the audience that's going to be at an event. If you're an exhibitor going in, are these really even the customers that I want to serve? They hadn't done their homework to realize, oh, we shouldn't probably be spending this kind of money because that person that needs what we offer isn't there at the scale that we would need it to be there to get the return on let's say a $50,000 spend. You'd probably want to get a couple $100,000 return on that. And they didn't, and they were mad, but it's actually because someone didn't do their homework and figure out, oh, that audience used to be at this event. They're not at this event anymore. So we should scale back our spend or just not be there, period.
You said a word in the beginning, intention.
Mm,
And I think I love that word. And I think about the idea. It's like all the 80s and 90s rom-com movies where, the dad says to the daughter's boyfriend, "What's your intention with
right.
my daughter?" Right. But it's a great question though, because
Yes.
intention is asking somebody, why are you here? What are you doing here? What is
Yep.
really the overarching, like, what is your intention of being here? And I think for people that are putting on events, building trade show booths, event marketers that are activating for their company, it's your why. Why are you here? Are you here just because you're always here? Are you here because, you know what I mean? Like, that's a bad intention, and not in a negative sense. It's just a bad answer. If someone says, "What's your intention of being at this trade show this year?" And they say, "Well, we always come." I know immediately you're not going to do anything great at this show. Are you going to really push your business initiatives? No. Are you really going to
Yep.
create a return? Probably not. But somebody that says, "Well, this is kind of turning into more of a user conference for us because some of the feedback we're getting from our customers is that once you start using our software, there's a big learning curve. And we want to get
Mm,
face to face with people and sit with them and have our experts give them time to come up. And we have all these demo stands and private rooms we're talking through. Now, that's intention. And I don't even
yeah.
care what it is, but if you're specific with your intention, that tells me that you're working from an initiative. You're working from the idea of that whatever it is that you're doing will create a return. And I think that
Yeah.
that word that you used is so important.
And I might add to that. Make sure, let's say that you are the person that signed the contract to be at this event. Make sure that the team that you send understands the intention and the hopes that you had. So I try to go around and talk to people who are vendors at our event. And you'll be surprised how many times someone has shown up who was just the next person in line available to man
Yeah.
the booth. And they really don't understand what the fit is between the brand
Yep.
and the people at the conference. And they're sitting there
That's a great
bored.
one.
They're sitting there bored on their phone. They're just showing a lack of interest. That right there is a waste of money twice, because they spent money on the booth and they spent money on someone who shouldn't have been there. So you got to get the alignment. Whoever thought it was a good idea on the sales team, and we try to coach anyone that comes to our event and make sure that they're maximizing that return, that they've got all the things in place, and the people that are coming. I haven't seen that scenario happen in several years, but you see it at other events all the time. It's like someone's standing there completely bored, or staff at an event's a great example too. Like someone who's paid to be there doing security and they really would rather be with their family or at the beach. It's like, come on, you're here to help us create an amazing experience for people. We sometimes have to make it a great experience for that person so they'll do it, but I'm getting off point there.
No, I like what you said by adding the layer in of the other parties and people involved for the trade show space. A lot of time, specifically it's that, you have an event marketer or a marketer leading the charge on that trade show. And then sales is coming in, other people are coming in, but they don't know the plan. They don't know the intention. They don't know the strategy. That is a total disconnect. Now you have a person that's just there, but they don't really understand why. And I'm sure that bleeds out into events and staffing and people and everything there. It's kind of in a way like it's like having a company. I mean, my leadership team and I talk all the time at Rockway. We talk about, like, do people here know what we stand for? Do they know who we are? Do they know what we're trying to accomplish as a company? Because if they don't, inevitably, at some point, they're going to be confused, off track, or not really know what's going on. So that intentionality of saying, hey, this is our intention. Do you want to be a part of this intention? I think it's the same thing for events. And I'm glad you said that word, because I think it's a super important word when it comes to, your why, what you're doing it well, creating results, pushing initiatives, which ultimately is what events are for.
Yeah, I think being aware of your intentions, the customer's intentions, all around the table is important. There is that moment, that we learned from Steve Jobs, where the customer doesn't always know what they need. So sometimes you have to help them discover what that is, or you have to offer them something that they need, that they need, and help them get from here to there. And that's a lot of times why people go to conferences too, is they know there's something missing and they don't know what it is. And we try to create the space where they can have that discovery, whether we know the answer or we know that the answer is going to be actually discovered in community, which can be a powerful thing when that happens.
Absolutely. Let's wrap this up here. Where can people, well, first tell us the book, name of the book, when it's coming out, and any information around the book for anybody who listens to this and would like to get a hold of your book to ensure that they don't make forgettable events and that they make unforgettable events.
Absolutely. The book's title is Unforgettable, The Art and Science of Creating Memorable Experiences. We'll just go ahead and pull up a copy of it here.
Nice.
It's available for order already on all the online bookstores. The global release date is September 5th. So if you're listening to this before, it will be mailed out on that date. If you're listening after, it's already available. If you want a signed copy, you can find it at philmershon.com. And all of my social links are there too. I have preference for Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me and follow me, that would probably be the best way to do it.
Awesome. Phil, fun conversation. Good luck with the book. I will certainly be purchasing one. And I appreciate you being on here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.